Sarah Voss had learned a long time ago that the best way to survive in Thornhaven was to be invisible. She kept her eyes low when she walked through the market. She folded the noble family's laundry without making a sound. She ate alone, slept alone, and never asked anyone for anything, because asking invited conversation, and conversation always led to the same place, to the word that followed her name everywhere she went. Cursed. They had been calling her that since she was a child. The elders of Thornhaven said her mother died because of her, that something dark traveled in her blood from the moment she was born. Most people in the Moon Kingdom received their wolf on the night of their 18th birthday. A shift, a howl, a bonding that tied them to the greater pack and gave them a place in the world. When Sarah turned 18, nothing happened. She stood under the full moon, with the rest of her age group, waited, and felt nothing stir inside her. No shift, no howl, just the wind, and the sound of others celebrating around her, while she stood very still and tried not to show how much it hurt. After that night, the word followed her everywhere. She did not fight it. She had tried, once, when she was younger. She had told an elder that she was not cursed, that she simply hadn't shifted yet, that maybe it would come later. The elder had looked at her the way adults look at children who don't yet understand how the world works, and said nothing, which was somehow worse than any argument. So she stopped fighting and started surviving. She took laundry work from the noble households because it required no pack membership, paid enough to keep her small stone room at the edge of the village, and kept her far enough from people that she didn't have to hear the word as often. She was 22 now, 4 years of surviving, 4 years of keeping her head down. She had become very good at it. The news about the Alpha King arrived on a Tuesday morning, carried by a young messenger on horseback, who seemed thrilled by his own importance. Sarah heard it through the wall of the elder hall while she was collecting a basket of linens from the side entrance. The Alpha King, Kaelin Dravon, ruler of all 7 packs of the Moon Kingdom, was coming to Thornhaven for the Great Choosing. Sarah had heard of the Great Choosing the way everyone had, in stories. Once every decade, the Alpha King's bonded wolf, a silver creature of extraordinary age and intelligence, named Kael, would travel with his companion to a chosen village and perform the ceremony. Kael would walk among the people, and, if he found someone worth acknowledging, he would choose them. What the wolf sensed in a person, no one could explain. What happened to the chosen one afterward varied. Some became advisors to the Alpha King, some became high sentinels, some simply returned to their lives with a story no one believed. But the wolf had never, in recorded history, chosen wrong. Whatever Kael saw in a person, it turned out to matter. The noble families of Thornhaven had known about the visit for months, and had been preparing their daughters with the seriousness of people preparing for a war. Sarah was assigned to press the ceremonial tablecloths. She accepted the assignment without comment, and went back to work. The night before the ceremony, she was hauling water from the well near the elder hall when she heard 2 women talking around the corner of the building. She recognized the voices, 2 daughters of a minor pack chief, the kind of young women who had grown up with every advantage and still found reasons to be unkind. They were talking about her. She heard her name, and then her mother's name, and then a story about her mother's last hours that was not true, but had been told so many times in Thornhaven that most people had stopped questioning it. Sarah set down the water bucket very carefully and stood still until the voices moved away. She did not cry. She had not cried about this particular kind of thing in years, but she walked back to her small stone room and sat on the edge of her bed for a long time, pressing her hand flat against her chest, feeling her own heartbeat, wondering, not for the first time, but with a tiredness that had grown heavier with the years, why she had been made this way. Why no wolf? Why no pack? Why, after 22 years, was she still standing alone outside every circle that everyone else seemed to belong to naturally? She asked the question quietly, almost to herself, almost to the strip of moonlight that came through her small window. She did not expect an answer. Outside, the wind shifted. There was a sound, very low, almost below hearing, like a single deep note played on an instrument she didn't have a name for. She listened for a moment. Then she decided it was just the wind and lay down to sleep. The Alpha King arrived at dawn with a company of riders, and very little ceremony of his own making, which surprised everyone. Kalen Dravon was younger than the story suggested, a man in his mid-30s with dark hair, a calm face, and the quality of stillness that belongs to people who have long since stopped needing to prove anything. He moved through the crowd of bowing nobles without speeding up or slowing down, acknowledging each person with a small nod that managed to be polite without being warm. Beside him walked Kale. The wolf was enormous, larger than any natural wolf, with silver fur that caught the early morning light and held it. His eyes were pale and steady, and when he looked at something, he looked at it completely, without distraction. The crowd gave him space not because they were asked to, but because something about the wolf made the air around him feel serious. Sarah watched from the service corridor that ran along the side of the elder hall. She had a stack of pressed tablecloths to deliver to the main room, but the ceremony procession had blocked the usual path, and she was waiting for an opening. She told herself she was watching simply because there was nothing else to do while she waited. She watched the wolf scan the assembled crowd, the ranked warriors, the pack elders in their best furs, the daughters of chieftains who had spent months preparing for exactly this moment. Kale's gaze moved across all of them slowly, without stopping. Then she turned to find the other entrance to the corridor, and the wolf's head snapped toward her. She went completely still. Kale's pale eyes found hers across the distance, with a directness that made her feel briefly as though the corridor walls had disappeared and they were standing in an open field. Then the procession moved forward, and the moment passed, and she told herself she had imagined it. The ceremony was held in the open courtyard behind the elder hall, under a sky that had cleared to a flat, bright blue. The whole village was assembled in a wide crescent around the ceremonial stone. Kalen stood at the center, and Kale sat beside him, completely still, while the ceremony elder announced each candidate by name, bloodline, and rank. One by one, young women walked forward. One by one, Kale did not move. The elder's voice grew slightly tighter with each announcement. The crowd, which had started in excited murmuring, grew quieter. Two pack chiefs exchanged a glance. One of the chieftain's daughters, who had walked up with great confidence, walked back with a face she was working very hard to control. Kalen's expression revealed nothing, but someone standing close to him might have noticed the very slight shift in his posture, the small adjustment that a person makes when they are waiting for something they cannot control and are trying to make peace with that. Then Kale stood up. He did not stand toward the candidates. He turned and walked directly through the assembled crowd, which separated in front of him without anyone needing to be asked. The ceremony elder began to speak, began to say something about procedure, about the proper order of events, and Kale paid no attention to any of it. The wolf walked with the calm purposefulness of someone who knew exactly where he was going and saw no reason to explain himself. He walked to the service corridor. Sarah was still standing there with the tablecloths. She had been about to leave. She had heard the silence fall over the courtyard and decided this was a good moment to slip out. And then Kale appeared at the end of the corridor, and she could not move at all. Her feet simply stopped working. The wolf crossed the distance between them slowly, giving her time to understand what was happening, which she found she could not do. He stopped in front of her, lowered his great silver head, and pressed his nose gently to her chest, exactly where her hand had been the night before, when she sat alone on the edge of her bed and asked the moon why. For one breath, everything was quiet. Then something inside her answered. It was not a sound she heard with her ears. It was warmth, sudden and complete, moving through her the way sunlight moves through a window when a cloud finally passes, filling spaces she had grown so used to being empty that she had stopped noticing them. The mark that should have appeared on her collarbone at 18 lit up in silver, bright enough to see in daylight, visible to every person in the courtyard who had turned to watch, which was every person in the courtyard. She had a wolf. She had always had a wolf. The crowd was silent for a long moment. Then the sound started. First the murmuring, then the voices rising, then the ceremony elder speaking loudly about precedent and proper candidates, and the question of eligibility. Two pack chiefs stepped forward. One of the chieftain's wives said something sharp and carrying about the indignity of the situation. Nobody looked at Sarah while they were talking about her. It was a skill she recognized. She had spent years being discussed without being addressed. Then Kalen spoke. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. He simply said that Kale had chosen, that the ceremony existed because human judgment makes mistakes, and the wolf's does not, and that the word people had been using to describe this young woman was a story frightened people tell when they encounter something they cannot explain. He said that anyone who wished to formally dispute the wolf's choice was welcome to make that argument to him directly, that evening, in the elder hall. No one moved. Then the ceremony elder, a man who had personally signed the document that barred Sarah from the pack registry 4 years ago, slowly lowered himself to one knee. The rest of the courtyard followed. Sarah stood in the service corridor holding a stack of tablecloths and felt the silver mark warm against her skin, like something that had been waiting patiently for a very long time and was glad to finally be known. Kalen was the last to approach her. He came without a crowd around him, walking with the same unhurried calm she had noticed from the corridor. Up close, he was quieter than he appeared from a distance, and there was something in his face when he looked at her. Not pity, not triumph, just genuine attention, as if she were a question he had been carrying without knowing what it was. Kale has never chosen before, he said. She understood what he meant. In all the decades of the Great Choosing, across all the villages Kale had walked through, the wolf had never once stopped. She asked what happened now. He was quiet for a moment, and when he answered, she thought it might be the most honest thing she had ever heard a powerful person say. I don't know, he told her. That's the first time in a long while I've been able to say that. In the weeks that followed, Sarah did not become a queen in the storybook sense, with a crown and a grand ceremony and a crowd cheering her name. What she became was harder to name and more real than any title. She sat at the Alpha King's council table, and she listened the way a person listens when they have spent years being quiet because no one expected them to speak, which meant she heard things that the louder voices in the room consistently missed. She asked questions that made the oldest advisors pause and think before answering. She remembered details. She noticed patterns. She was, as it turned out, exactly what the council had been missing, without knowing it was missing anything at all. Her wolf, when it came fully, was not silver like Kale. It was the deep, still gray of the sky in the last few minutes before sunrise, that small window between night and morning that most people sleep through. She thought it suited her. Thornhaven did not forget what it had done. Sarah did not ask it to. She had no interest in making people feel guilty, and she had no interest in spending the rest of her life being defined by the years she had spent being called cursed. What she was interested in was the world in front of her, which was larger than she had been allowed to see before, and full of things she had not yet learned. Kalen, for his part, came to understand over those weeks that Kale had not simply chosen someone for him. The wolf had chosen someone for the kingdom, a person who had lived through being its greatest failure and had not come out of it angry or bitter or small, but clear. Clear in a way that is rare and valuable and almost impossible to teach. On a night some weeks after the ceremony, Sarah stood at the edge of the Thornhaven forest, the same forest she had spent her whole life watching from the outside because she had no pack to run with. Kale was beside her. Her wolf stirred, warm and steady, ready. Kalen stood a few steps back, not crowding the moment, giving her the space to have it fully. She took a breath. She shifted. She ran into the trees, and the forest opened for her the way it had always been meant to, and the moon above was enormous and silver and close. The moon had never forgotten her. It had simply been waiting, the way all good things wait, for the right moment to show itself.